Thank you very much, Malin. And also, Malin, just seeing as we are here in our private, time together, what are you up to? What are you working on right now? What company are you at? Where are you in the world? Same question to Marcus, to Stefan. Welcome in. Tell me about yourself. Tell me what you're up to. And to you, Katrina. May as well have a little bit of a chat before everybody else gets here. So, Malin, you said you're in Stockholm working as a QA manager at Natural Cycles contraceptive app. Awesome. Awesome. Fahim, welcome. Felix, welcome. People are just writing in the chat a little bit about themselves and just where are they in the world? Katrina, Marcus, Stephen, Kate, you all know that, well, you'll end up seeing this is going to be quite an interactive session. We've all been to many webinars where we've just sat and kind of put it on the side and it hasn't been that interesting. So super excited to always hear what people are actually doing. Marcus says, cheers everyone, greetings from Austria. Oh, awesome. What are you currently working on, Marcus? What is your role? What are you up to? So Marcus says that he's currently working on new mobile apps that are being developed by his team. And we as QA have to make sure they suit our customers' needs. And that, Marcus, that is the epitome of what we're even going to talk about today, which is QA making sure that they're having that customer focus. So I already know that you are you're in the right room, and you're going to find a lot of this super interesting. And seeing as we're just about time, I think we should get going. So this is going to be a webinar about the missing piece in your testing strategy to maximize customer delight. And I am pretty excited about this one. My name is Ronald Cummings-John, and I'm the founder of Global App Testing. And why am I excited about this one, I hear you ask? Well, the main reason is because in the short time that we have today, we're going to cover a few different things. We are going to talk about how do you protect your time so you can prioritize more strategic initiatives in the work that you're doing. How do you excite your team and the business about the testing strategies that you have so you can have better momentum? And then 3 different and really effective and impactful ways that you can become more customer-centric in the QA that you do. And lastly, we're hopefully going to add in some methods that can help you enhance your product roadmap by leveraging some of the insights that you can get from things like crowd testing. And so I plan to put my all into this webinar for you guys. And so I just need to make sure that you are here and that you're ready. So if you could just put a yes, a hell yeah, a let's go, anything that kind of says, I'm ready to make this happen, and we can kick this off. So in the chat, just let us know you're here and let us know that you're ready for this. Let's go. Greetings. Yes. Wow, this is it. This is it. This is the team I want to be talking with right here. So what do I need from you through this webinar? I really want to make sure that you come into this webinar with an implementation mindset, because as we go through this webinar, I'm going to be sharing some incredible actionable ideas. And while you're listening, I want you to catch that sound in your head. And that sound is those points where you're thinking to yourself, hey, that could be interesting. Because really, that sound is just your brain saying, we should do something with what Ronald has just said on the webinar. So make sure that you're here with that implementation mindset, and we can truly get the best out of this. So how did today even come to be? Well, 7 or 8 years ago, we were running a VC-backed startup, and we ran into a few testing and quality issues. And to tell you the truth, it just pained us so much that we decided to pivot the company and build a testing focused company instead. And fast forward to today, and we're now running global app testing, which is one of the largest crowdsourced testing companies in the world. And most of our time is really spent supporting our customers with both exploratory and usability forms of testing. And we do this in a pretty special way, which allows the teams that we work with to become more customer-centric in their testing approach, which is something I already know people like Marcus are making sure that they're focusing on with that customer-centric, as he was telling us earlier in the chat. And we have 50,000 testers that we work with around the world, an incredible internal team that are just hell-bent on making sure that our customers enjoy partnering with us. And yes, you will see lots of big names here on the screen, but we work with companies of all sizes. And being surrounded by all of these leaders who care about quality gives us this really interesting perspective on what works and what doesn't. It's particularly when you're thinking about things like culture, strategy, and leadership as it relates to quality inside a company. And 2 years ago, we ended up publishing a book on this pretty much same subject. It was called Leading Quality, and it became an Amazon bestseller. And that day, we were pretty excited in our office, so much so that we just ate a lot of cake. And not only was the cake interesting, but what was more interesting than that was some of the top people in the industry, what they were saying about it. We had people from companies like Twitter, Slack, New York Times, eBay, just saying that this, what we had built and what we had written here is really the foundation for how to lead quality inside your company. But the thing that I guess humbled me even more was the very people that we looked up to, our heroes and sheroes at the beginning of our own journey, were now the same people that were sitting here endorsing us. And this is Lisa Crispin, who created some of the foundational work around agile testing. And so we have a bit of a challenge today. The challenge is we got to work out, how do we take 2,000 plus hours of research and writing about leading quality, countless conversations with our customers, our internal teams from customer success, etc. And we got to distill all of that into some actionable takeaways from this webinar. And the reason I was excited, because I think we've done it. I think we've worked out how to do that. And there's really 3 key areas. We're going to talk about, number 1, how do you work on your department and not in your department? Well, not as much in your department. And we're going to look at things like prioritizing your time so you can, get the priority straight and really work on more strategic initiatives. We're going to talk about how do you get your team excited about the goals that the business has and how testing is going to play a part to that. And then we're going to look at the second idea of how do you include a more customer-centric dimension into your testing. And we've got 3 ways that we're going to cover that. And it doesn't even matter what your budget is, we'll be looking at different ways that you can make that happen. And then lastly, we're going to share some insights in a way about, we're going to look at how do you share the insights of the testing that you have in a way that helps resolve some of the customer pain points that you might have. And so let's get started on this first one, which is the idea of working on your department and less in your department. And so when I talk to most people, they're usually working in their department. And what does that look like? Well, it looks like dealing with emails, meetings, Slack messages, emergency fires, people problems, hiring, more people problems. And my favorite, the meeting about the meeting. And we've all been there. We look at our diary and it is just swarmed with all of these things. But the issue that this brings is that it means that you don't have as much time or space to actually really think. And when you look at the difference between a leader versus an individual contributor, it really is this difference between the leaders spend more time working on their department, whereas individual contributors are often just working in their department. And so what does working on the department even look like? And well, it's really when you have the time to think about things strategically. You can assess the options of what you should do with all the information that you have now and the situation that your company's in. And also ensure that your teams are working on the biggest impact activities. And the higher the impact, the more successful you end up being for what I like to call the 3 C's. So the more successful you are for your customers, your company, and quite importantly, your own career. And so quickly inside this chat room, I want to ask a quick question. And that is, would you say that if you looked over the past 2 weeks, that you spent more of your time working on your department or more of your time working in your department? I want to see in the chat room, let's get some ons and some ins inside that box, and we can see what the majority of our room is currently doing. Are you working more on the department or are you working more in the department? You decide. Let's see what happens. So Erica is working on, and I know Erica, and I know she's definitely always working on. She's always pushing to make sure that is happening. A true leader in quality right there. And then we've got some people coming in now. A few ins, definitely in. It happens to the best of us. A few ons, despite others' best efforts. Yes, a little bit of both. Awesome. And really, we will always have this little bit of both. But what we'll talk about today is just making sure we're really capitalizing on that on section as much as possible. And so here are some tips to be able to work a little bit more on than we currently are right now. The first one is looking at how do we protect our time, assess the business goals of what's happening, and make sure that we share goals with our team so that we can steer our testing strategy. And a lot of people say to me when I talk about, hey, you know, let's look at your time. People are like, you know, I don't have that much time. And this is true for most of us, right? We all end up in these situations where there is so much going on around us that we don't have as much time to do all the things that we want to do as possible. And the question that I sometimes say to this is, you know, has there ever been enough time in your life? There is always stress and deadlines in everything that we do. And I think our lives, we just live in these perpetual deadlines. And that stressed version of you today is going to be the same stressed version of you tomorrow if you don't adjust or have the time to actually see what you can change. But the truth is, it's not that easy, right? And it's something that I've struggled with for a long time as well. But I distinctly remember my mentor, a mentor of mine, asking me a very profound question. And he said to me, he said, Ronald, what if it was your job to work on the department and to really focus on that being a thing? How would that change your priorities of what you end up doing in a day? And we all have that same 24 hours in our day, but what really separates the great leaders is those who make the time to work on the business. And what my mentor made me realize is that it's all about how we prioritize and what do we put as more important than another thing. Now, as you think about your own priorities, if you create a list of all the things that you have to do in your week and the next coming weeks, and you made sure that you added into there this whole idea of working on the business a bit more, and you then started to do a prioritization exercise, and you ask questions like, hey, what activities would have the highest impact on how I run my team, or what activities would get me out of the weeds so I could have more of that time in the long run? Every time I've asked these questions to other leaders and to myself, it has always been, I probably should spend a bit more time working on the business than I am right now, because that's what's going to have the exponential impact of us as leaders. And so how do you protect some of that time? And here's some things that I have used and seen others use, and I wanted to make sure that I share these with you. For those that even still are working on the business, but how do you find even more time or take time for other activities? And really, a lot of our calendars get filled with other people's objectives. You know, you look at your calendar and people just adding invites left, right, and center. But if you look in your diary right now, you look a week ahead, 2 weeks ahead, 4 weeks ahead, there's usually a gap. And I often say to myself and to some of our team, I'm like, make sure that you protect that time now. So if you looked in your diary right now, just mark off that time already, save it before someone else puts something else inside that time. And once you have that time, it just gives you so much more room to just sit and think. So now, you've blocked out that time and you're sitting in front of your desk, you got your cup of coffee by the side, blank paper in front of you. Now, what do you do with that time? How do you get the best out of that time as a leader of quality? And really, the way that we look at it is we say, hey, why don't you first start by looking at what the business's goals are, and understanding, is the business that you're in right now, are they trying to grow via things like customer acquisition of new customers or new users, or are they focused a little bit more about keeping the existing users, or keeping retention or expanding the existing users' spend? Because this helps us have a bit of a different thought about how we look at what we want to do from a quality aspect to help support the business. And sometimes when I talk to people about these two ideas, project managers abhor a vacuum in your calendar. Yep, I mean, everyone's got a job, Vernon, everyone's got a job. But yes, other people are always doing that. And as someone else has said here, the struggle that they come is when all of the urgent things come in. And what we find is, if you don't protect that time, you will use that time for the urgent things. But if you say, hey, I've really got to sort this out, you might end up shifting it when an emergency comes in, but it will still at least be there as a thing for you to complete as a core important task. And everyone thinks that what they're doing is urgent. Maybe your work is urgent to sort out how our department's going to work. And so when I talk to some people about this whole concept of customer acquisition and customer retention, they often say to me, but Ron, what companies really care about is the money. They're not really caring so much about the customer design, they just care about making money. But the real question is, who provides the money? It is the customers. And that's why having such a customer-centric approach is always so important. And when we think about great leaders who've had a customer focus, a lot of people mention people like Steve Jobs. But the interesting thing about good old Steve is that he didn't always think like this. It was a gentleman called Joseph Duran who helped bring a quality focus into the manufacturing industry, who taught Steve to have this more customer-centric approach to quality. And I think it just goes to show that even the best in the world need support to get them thinking more about this quality to customers. And so how does this apply to yourself and to your teams? And I often use this term called local personas. And that is that your customer, they expect the applications that you build for them to work perfectly for them, no matter where they are, what device they're using, or their own background. And each of those are so unique that they're local to that person. And so when we're thinking about maybe our company want to grow via retention and expansion, how do we understand our existing users more? And how do we make sure that we are maybe testing in line with the persona of our existing users? And we have done, we've traveled the world doing testathons and looking at how people test. And this whole idea of getting the persona of our customer as we test and getting that mental model in our mind of it helping to guide our testing, it can have such a profound impact into making sure that we're providing as much customer value in terms of the way that we work. But if your company is more focused on new customers, one thing that is always important to remember is that your new customers might not be the same as your existing customers. So you have to now start thinking about different profiles than the ones that you already have. And a great example of this is the unicorn company called Canva. And there's a gentleman called Raymond who looks after testing over at Canva. And when he first approached us to work with him, Canva they weren't doing 6 billion, they weren't a 6 billion valuation company at that point, but they knew that they wanted to grow. And what they had realized is a lot of their customers were in English speaking markets, but in order for them to get that next level of growth, they knew they had to approach non-English speaking markets. And that was what was in their mind of how they were going to grow. And that business objective, Raymond started to think about how could he start to think about that when he was looking at testing. And I'll reveal some of the steps that he took and some of the things that he was thinking about as we go along here today. Now, after you've got clear on where the business is going and starting to have those beginning thoughts about what can we do as a team, as a quality team to help influence that, make sure that you're speaking with your team. Make sure that you are discussing with your team so that they know that the work they're doing is going to help move that needle. And we're going to share with you lots of different ways to do that through this webinar. But if you just took a second you took that time out, you had some time to think about where the business is going, how your department might work, and you jumped on that Zoom call with your whole team. And everyone understood that direction so clearly that they were pumped and they were excited. And that one person, and I know you all know who that one person is, that one person who is just the guy or girl on your team that you're just is never there. You know, they're never with it. They always have some other complication to the situation. That person, imagine them being the one that completely gets it. They're fully aligned and they're ready to go because they're now understanding how they're going to contribute towards that greater goal. And that is really what we get to do when we have this focus. Now, these ideas sound super simple, and I don't think I think they're more useful than we actually recognize. Because I was having a chat with a friend of mine, and he had read the Leading Quality book, and he'd implemented some of the ideas, and he asked me to do a private talk to his company, which is something that I don't do that often. And I ended up giving this talk about creating a culture of quality into the company. And the next day, I got this message from him, and he basically ended up getting promoted because of how much he was focusing on the department and its contribution to the company. And all the senior leaders above him started to recognize, they were like, well, that's the person we want to help us grow to where we're trying to go to. So, I'm not saying that it's life-changing, but it definitely is, could have an impact, these simple things, if you make sure that you're thinking about them in your life. And so what else could we potentially do to help move the business forward? And I think that really comes down to this second key step that we're talking about here, which is including a customer-centric dimension in your testing strategy. Now, when I have conversations with leaders about their testing strategy, a common thing that I hear people talk about is their automation strategy. And they talk about it as if it's the only part of the strategy. But when you kind of go out of the strategic conversation, you come into maybe a types of testing conversation, we all know that you need both automated and manual forms of testing. And I'm not going to, everyone here already gets it, right? And this was a survey of 1,200 developers and tech leaders, and they asked them, their views between the balance of automated and manual testing. And the 70% was saying, hey, manual testing is as, if not more important than automated testing. And we all get why. It comes down to that value that you get when you have a human doing exploratory or usability forms of testing. We get to uncover the things that we don't know, and maybe that helps us later on down the line with our automated testing. And the thing that I want you to think about is, as you think about your own testing strategy, have you really looked at this other part, the non-automated part? And what I'm seeing more and more often is it's less about having so much of a manual testing strategy, and it's more about focusing on a strategy that looks at the impact to your customers. And so if you're going to leave here with one thing, if you're that kind of person that says, I'll write something down when he says write something down, this is it, right? What's the customer dimension of your testing strategy? How are you increasing how customer focused you are when thinking about quality? Because the reason this is important is because having a customer-centric approach to quality, it just helps you focus on the things that will impact the business goals that you outlined earlier. And the closer your testing is to your customer, or a proxy that you use to be close to your customer, the better you're going to make your product. And the magical bit is when you take this approach, you not only start to find functional issues that you would potentially do with your internal team, but you also get insights and feedback that can give you a deeper understanding as to why a customer is using or doing a certain thing or not doing a certain thing. And I always think in my mind that's quite a multiplier, because it only takes one piece of information to have a major impact on your business and your team being responsible for that. And so that's why this whole focus on customer-centric is so important. But what are some of the other ways we can do this? Well, there are different ways you can look at this. You can do it yourself. You can train your team to use and test with those personas in mind, really making them to understand the customer as much as possible as they're doing that testing, getting into the minds of those customers. And, as we said, we've seen this work so well in terms of the actual way that some people look at testing. And this is a great way to do if you don't have that much of a budget to do anything that's an alternative. But what we sometimes see is that what people face is when you've been working on a product for so long, you can be a bit too close to it, right? And you can't always see the woods from the trees, as they say. It's a little harder to get some of those more usability insights, and not every company can afford to buy all of the devices that their customers use, or fly their customers or fly their teams to just different locations. So Airbnb fly their team to lots of locations. Companies like Spotify, they just buy every device in existence like 5 times in order to move themselves forward. The second option that you might choose to use then is to use your users, right? We've seen companies like Google do this really well. Things like Google Maps, they utilize the user base to be beta users for them, so they can test the application for them. Now, this works for some companies, it doesn't work for all. There's some reputation risk that comes, so not everyone's as comfortable with it. But this is something that I remember Raymond, who was at Canva, he had tried in the past. And I remember him saying that, it was just so difficult to manage everything and all of these people. And not only is it difficult because of that organizational overhead, there's also that users aren't as reliable when you need something tested right now. Like we have that deadline, you need it worked on, they might not be available for it. And they don't always report things in the way that you need it for your developers to work on it. So there is a third option, and sometimes people do each of these, they use all of them. And the third option is really to leverage a partner. And that's the kind of thing that we do at Global App Testing, where we have a global crowd of testers that you can use as a proxy to your users. And there are a few benefits. You could tap into the value of all of these people. You can have them instantly available 24/7. You get this whole mix of device and OS combinations in any location. And also, they know how to report issues in the way that your team report issues that your developers are actually going to work on and use. And this was pretty much what Canva decided to use. So they ended up working with us to do this. But what Raymond ended up saying is that the important thing for him is the time that he was able to save, because for him, time was actually the most precious thing. He had all these things he needed to do. And by working with us, it freed up so much time for him to be able to work on more impactful things. And it's funny because sometimes when I talk to people, the concern that they have over using a partner like us or someone else is that they worry, is it gonna replace their existing team? Does it replace their team? Can they work side by side? Do they have budget for it all? And I personally love this thought because it shows that you're a leader who cares about the people in your team, and great leaders care about their people. But when I look at the people who use us the most, they actually use us because they care about their team. And they want their team focused on activities that only their internal team can do. And then they have us deal with that broader testing that sits around it. But they also get those additional benefits of a crowd of testers around the world that do things they couldn't do internally, which is all the devices and the location that gets added on top. And then the other common concern that people often have when they think about a partner is, will the testers even understand my product as well as my internal team? And the truthful answer is no. What ends up happening is it's not so much that we even want to be able to test like your internal team. What we actually want to do is to test more like your customers and your users. And that's the mindset that we come with when we end up working with people. And that perspective is what allows for those additional insights that come from the type of testing that we do that you might not get from your internal team. So although saying that, our testers do see just such a wide variety of products and testing challenges that we have, like I've been on many calls where our customers have said to us, your testers seem to know our product better than us. And so it can all happen. It can be complex, it can be uncomplex. It's really for us to have a chat and decide, and we can talk about some of those things later. But essentially, whatever you choose to do, whether you choose to use us, whether you choose to use your users, whether you choose to do it internally, keep the question in mind about having that customer focus. Really keep that point in your mind of, am I going to be able to add as much value by having this customer focus as I want? And think to yourself, what could I potentially do with that additional time? Stefan made one of the best points I couldn't even thought of myself. If the testers don't understand the product, your customers won't either. I think that is a great and very, very true statement. Um, and so, what do you do with that extra time? And this is what I'm always thinking. How do we add more value as individuals in our company now that we've freed up time of our internal team and time of our own? How can we be more strategic in our company and work more on the business than we did beforehand? And always, again, keep that in mind, this whole idea of what is the customer dimension of your testing strategy. Please think about this, because this is really what's key to making sure that we add as much value to our business as people are looking at quality in our companies. So you've had a chance to work on the business, you've got super customer centric in terms of the strategies that you've chose, and now you've got a whole load of results. What do you do with them? And this is where this third step comes in, about sharing insights in a way that actually resolves the issue for the customer. And I have this saying, which is, test results mean nothing if nothing has changed for your customer. And this is such a critical area that I don't think people spend enough time, talking about with their team, which is when you focus your teams on their ability to actually get the test results into the right person's hands who's going to fix it, you actually have a greater impact of making change for your end customer. And so how you influence that change is critical. And we did tons of research around this while writing the Leading Quality book, and there's lots of great ideas in there, but I want to give you some quick ideas that might be useful for you. And this is about sharing those insights. So a friend, she's actually on this call. So Erica is on this call. Erica Chestnut is the head of quality over at Calendly, and she said one of my most favorite lines. She says, "You've always got to be socializing quality." And I love it, because it's all about making sure that you're building relationships with the right people. And think in your mind, what are the interdepartmental relationships that you and your team need to have and need to build? And it's not just the engineering team. If you really want to get something fixed that you think could have a commercial impact, why not, make sure the commercial team know about it, because they could add additional pressure, which gets it fixed for the customer, which is the game that we're truly in. The other thing that you can do is you really filter results and prioritize them against those initial objectives, going back to those business objectives and just going, okay, how can we triage these results with that in mind? Which issues will potentially move that needle of growth or retention that we had? And then lastly, it's about understanding the story you want to tell for the issue. I was on a phone call earlier this week with a friend of mine who had just started a new position as a head of testing. And he said to me that in this first week, all he was going to do was observe. And one of the things he observed was the way that one of his test team explained to a developer an issue that was found. And they basically said, "This is broke, you should fix it." And he said his face just melted in horror as he foresaw the backlash of this relationship with the developer. And he could have said, "Hey, this could be really important. I think it's going to affect 20% of our customers. Can we look at this soon, because I think this really could be super important." And he could have added more color and context. And really, how we present information is just as important as what the information that we're trying to give people is, if we're going to get it received and we're going to get it fixed. And this is why you've got to take care to make sure that when you are talking about results, we talk about them in the right way to the people that we want to work on them and fix them. And this is how you start to make some of that change to even the product roadmap. Because when you start getting insights in, you want to be able to share those insights with the product team in a way where they'll receive it and actually want to do something interesting with it. And this is what Raymond at Canva ended up doing. His team were pretty relentless about making sure that the issues that we found were being fixed and worked on by their engineering teams. And what this led to was they ended up growing their non-English market, which was pretty much not that much before, to over 60% of their user base. And that pretty much surpassed all of their expectations as a team. And when we were speaking with Raymond, he said the team morale was so high because everyone could see the impact that the work they were doing in the test team had on the company. And all the work that we'd done alongside them, it was really looking at the product as a whole. And so just imagine in your own mind that was you. that you had, ended up focusing so much on this impact side of quality, and the whole company were recognizing the effect that you were having, how would you feel? You'd probably feel pretty proud, right? And that's why I love the whole story of what Raymond and the Canva team have done, because it's just such a great example of leading quality across their business. And so a super quick recap on what we covered today. So we talked about how do you protect your time so you can prioritize some of those strategic initiatives and to spend even more time than you have already to make sure you're working on the business and you're not getting caught up in all of the project manager requests that might come in. How do you get your team excited and how do you keep them aligned in terms of how the test strategy that you have? And then we looked at 3 different ways that you could potentially impact the becoming more customer centric in the way that your team works. And then lastly, we looked at how do you enhance that product roadmap? How do you start to have conversations internally that make change and effect across the whole business? And so really, you've come here today, you've listened to me, you've got 2 choices. The first choice is you can just do nothing, right? You can stay with the current situation that you have, or you can put some of the things that we had today into action. Those ahas, you can actually see which of those might work for you as you move forward for the rest of your week and into the next weeks. And, if you're planning to put some of this into action, we at Global App Testing would love to help you. And whether you're a small company like Kameshan at Unibuddies, who's focusing on keeping his users super happy, or you're a bigger company like Tim over at Nation Building Society, who considers us his force multiplier, we can help you. We essentially have 50,000 plus testers globally around the world who can be available to work with you 24/7 with such a range of devices in any location if there's something that's important to you, so you don't have to sit and buy all of those devices. We integrate into people's existing systems, whether you're using Jira, DevOps, GitHub, whatever it is, we probably do integrate with it. And with that, we just aim to reduce that stress on your team and allow them to have a higher impact and work on those higher impact activities internally. And more importantly, it's about your time and giving you as a leader the time to continually think more strategically and lead inside your company, and having that headspace that doesn't just impact your company, but when you're in that better headspace, it impacts everything around you, your loved ones, your life outside of work. And we just want to make sure that we get to help and support people as they do that and on that journey. And just always thinking, what would you do with that extra time? And so if you would like to chat to us, you can either go to chatwithgat.com, or you can pull out your phone, and I think if you take a picture or you open your camera on this, the QR code will come up and it'll take you straight to that chatwithgat.com URL. But for everyone who is on this call today, if you end up chatting with our team and you want that leading quality book, you can get a free copy of that, as well as the worksheets that take you through all the different thinking, etc., that we've discussed today. If you just ask the team for that, they will provide that with you. And as we said before, there's some incredible tips on how to improve the culture of quality inside your company in there. And my favorite quote is Nick Caldwell, who's the VP of engineering at Twitter, who was like, "It's just a great practical guide to embed quality into the DNA of your company," which is quite a cool endorsement. But in addition to that, for the people who are on this call, who came here today, and this is only for the people who are here right now, if we do end up working together, and everything feels like it's a right fit, I will do an exclusive private leading quality talk for your company, just like I had done for my friend. And you and I will work together to make sure that we deliver a talk that helps with the cultural change that you want to make around quality in your department and your company. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll have an opportunity to really inspire some people together. And it did occur to me that there are people who are on this call that we already know and we already talk with. If you are one of those people, still head over to chatwithgat.com so that you register for this particular special bonus, which is only for people who are on this call. And that way, you're safely protected in that sort of, if you work with us, we'll end up working on a private talk together. And so I'm going to open up for questions in about 30 seconds. So I'll give you some time to begin thinking about some questions that you want to ask. But while you're thinking about them, if I had to guess why some people hesitate having a chat with us, is probably because oftentimes when you're in like a webinar, and someone says, have a chat with us or do this thing, people fast forward in their minds all the potential eventualities that this could lead to. And most of those are like the worst case scenarios, right? So people are like, what if we decide to work with you and, it doesn't work out? I don't want to look bad in front of my internal team if I made the wrong choice, or, is this going to be too much of an overhead for my own teams to help onboard you? I don't know if I should talk to you. I don't want you to hassle me too much. And look, that is the real aim of the chat, is actually just to help you think things through. Just like Steve Jobs had Joseph Duran, the best leaders always have sounding boards. And we have a solutions team that assess your application, and we will say no, that it doesn't make sense for us to work together if it doesn't make sense. The likelihood of you actually hitting that imaginary worst case is pretty low. And really the worst thing that could actually happen is that you spend that strategic time that you had allotted beforehand, and you end up leaving with a new perspective that you didn't have before. And so when you go to that link, chatwithgat.com, one of our team will work out a time for us to chat, and we can see if it makes sense, if it doesn't, and kind of go from there. And so with that, I've given you your 30 seconds to have a think about some potential questions, and we're going to open up the floor for questions if you have them. And Erica says, take advantage of that. It's an amazing book. Okay, we've just got a question in. You've talked about having 50,000 testers. How do you make sure they are skilled enough to work on my project? Not just anyone's project, okay? Your project. So let's talk about your project. Well, really, in order for our crowd community to even work with us, they have to pass a comprehensive QA assessment. So there's a whole assessment phase that they go through to get into the crowd. And then the second part is those who pass that assessment are then verified internally by our GAT team, and the different trials and ways that we make sure that they are going to be useful for us to work with. But lastly, and usually the most significant way that we make things, we make sure we've got the right people working on your application, is in order for us to manage our crowd, we have a whole testing, ranking algorithm and system whereby we start to work out who are the best people to work on X project, etc. And those end up being the people that get firstly invited to your project. And if you want to find out more about that, if you just have a chat with GAT, the solutions team can actually go into your actual application, what our experience has been to similar applications and stuff like that. And that probably should, help you understand how things work specifically for your app. We have a question here from Vernon. Have you seen a situation where you have to convince the test team to change perspective and adopt a quality mindset rather than the wider business beyond? Now, my mother always used to tell me that change starts in this house. And so 100%. In most cases, if you don't have your whole team on board, there isn't much you can do to change the perspective outside of the team. And really getting everyone on the same page inside your team and having them have that same passion for quality is what you're going to need, because it's going to take more than you as a single leader to influence that change. Most change happens from the many whispers that happen, the many conversations that happen in and around the business. And back to what the quote I said from Erica, which is socializing quality. If your team aren't on board internally, there isn't going to be much socializing they're going to be doing for quality. And so 100%, the same tactics for convincing and persuading the people externally are the same tactics that we use for convincing and persuading people internally. And some of the ways that we can do that is things like firstly, understanding what the objections are, like understanding why is someone not believing that this is a thing that we should do. You might have people in your team that are maybe potentially super old school and they don't believe in that change to be there. Now, ironically, the joy of being a leader is you get to decide whether your team is the team that's going to take you to where you're going to want to go to. And sometimes what I've seen leaders do is they have a rallying call with their team and they say, look, this is where we plan to go. Are you with me? Because if you're not, you're just gonna get annoyed being here. And then you have discussions over, does it make sense for them to be in the team or not? We also have another question here from Marcus. What kind of testing do they conduct? For example, load and performance testing, security testing. And I think you're referring to the testers here that we work with. So our testers end up doing more functional related testing. Usually when we have done experiments in the past also where a company would apply a load onto an application and then have our testers run a test during that period as a way of trying to understand, again, the customer's experience of what happens during that load, which is a way that we sometimes deal with that. But we used to in the past do security testing, but we no longer do that. And so we have different partners that we work with that we can introduce you to when you end up needing those additional things. And so, as I can't see any additional questions, and we promised you it would be about 45, are you able to do accessibility testing? Yes, we do accessibility testing. There's several frameworks that we go through to do that. And if you head over to the Chat with GAT team, the solutions team can actually take you through in a lot more detail how they will do that and how they'll do that in particular to the application that you have. And so with that, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone for today, because you not only came today, but you also stayed towards the end, right? Which tells me that you are committed to having success in your life and committed to being the best leader that you can. And those are exactly the type of people that we like to work with. So if you haven't already, jump over to chatwithgat.com, and I look forward to us working on that private talk with you and for your team and for your company. Until the next time we all have a chat, goodbye, and thank you very much for spending the time today.